Good morning, team. Welcome to the Standard Podcast, where we raise the bar, rebuild the culture, and call out the lies or misconceptions that nobody else will. This isn't motivation. This is a movement. I'm Thomas Rowe, joined by my host, Erin, Sarles, and today we're super stoked. We're sitting down with Abby Brenner, Director of Development at the United States Air Force Academy, Athletic Corporation, a former NCAA Division I student athlete, and leader who embodies what it means to serve something greater than yourself. Abby's story is one of excellence. Service and understanding true leadership extends far beyond individual achievement. As a former D1 student athlete, she earned her bachelor's degree in sports management from the University of Michigan, Go Blue, and completed her athletic career and master's degree in administration at the University of Utah, Go Utes. I know Erin's going to like that. Her competitive achievements also are remarkable. A 2021 NCAA National Championship and 3 Big Ten titles at Michigan, plus a 2023 Pac-12 Championship and third place finish at the NCAA National Championships with Utah. But here's what makes Abby's story so powerful. She chose to translate her athletic excellence into service for others. After beginning her career at the University of Utah with youth sports priorities, Learfield, where she partnered with corporate sponsors and then working in development at Boston College's athletic department, supporting fundraising across all 31 varsity sports. Abby now serves at the Air Force Academy. As Director of Development at the Air Force Academy, Abby advances philanthropic engagement efforts and strengthen Air Force athletics and enhance the cadet athlete experience. She works closely with donors, campus partners, and leadership to support fundraising priorities for those who will serve as leaders in character in the United States Air Force and Space Force. Her connection to Service Academy athletics runs deep. Her husband, Nicholas, is a proud U.S. Air Force class of 2020 graduate and former member of the men's soccer team. That's badass. Can't wait to hear about your kids in a couple decades. Contributing to 2 WAC Championships and a Sweet 16 NCAA Tournament appearance. Abby is passionate about fostering meaningful relationship with those who believe in developing leaders of character, proving that true success comes from using your platform to serve something greater than yourself. We're diving into the truth of what it really takes to build identity, discipline, and legacy in sports and in life. Let's get into it. Actually, with that introduction, Abby, our podcast is over. Everyone just go meet Abby. I mean, my God, she has a cape, super Wonder Woman there. Abby, thanks so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have you.
No, thanks so much for having me. I mean, this is, I was talking to my husband last night, Nick, and telling him that I was going to be on this podcast. And he said, that sounds right up your alley. You could talk 3 days, 4 days, 5 days straight about that. So no, truly, I'm so excited to be here. And thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Let's do it. Let's get into it. You're a former NCAA Division I athlete who won national and conference championships at Michigan and Utah. And you chose to dedicate your career to developing leaders of character through Service Academy athletics. What does raising the standard mean to you in your work at the Air Force Academy?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you kind of mentioned, I previously had a role at Boston College, which is a Power 4 school, ACC, doing kind of what you talked about, which is, student athlete development and fundraising for all these student athletes across the board. We all know that the NCAA landscape has changed drastically in the last 5-6 years. And so I think coming to the military and coming to the United States Air Force Academy has just meant so much more. There's 3 schools in the NCAA that I believe still operate how the NCAA was created and what it was meant for. And those are the military academies. That's West Point, Navy, and Air Force. We don't have NIL. We don't have revenue share. And not to mention, every single kid that's 18 years old is signing up to do something more than being a student athlete when it comes to campus. And so I think going off of, raising the standard of being a student athlete and what it means to be a student athlete truly is at the center of any military academy. I'm biased. I love the Air Force Academy. I think it's the best branch. Don't tell my father because he's Army and he's going to listen to this and probably shake his head. But biased with my husband being here and being a student athlete and knowing a lot of his friends and being on campus, been in this role for about 5 months now and meeting all the student athletes, the amazing student athletes on campus, and how mature and just level-headed they are at 18 years old coming onto campus. And like I said, doing something, signing up beyond being an athlete and truly becoming a leader of this country. And so I just think when we talk about raising the standard and my position at Air Force, I think, military cadet athletes are by far some of the best leaders and athletes of character.
No doubt. I think we talked about it when we first met. My dad was a 26-year Marine and a career Marine. And he said the same thing when I was looking to go to college. He's like, if you're going to look at one of the academies, start with the Air Force Academy. And that's coming from a Marine. So that carries a lot of weight. What's the biggest lie you feel the culture of collegiate athletics has sold student athletes about success, achievement, and what it really matters building a life and purpose of service?
Yeah, I think the biggest quote unquote lie or misconception is your accolades and actual athletic ability and career as an athlete is the most important thing. I feel like the pendulum has swung from, like I mentioned, what the NCAA was built on, which is, your athletic experience is supposed to enhance your academic experience. Your academic experience is supposed to enhance your athletic experience. And both are supposed to work simultaneously to enhance your overall 4-year career at college and set you up for the professional that you're going to be. And I feel like we've gone away from that a little bit with this college landscape. And so I think my biggest misconception is, that when you step onto campus, your 4 years is all focused on your accolades, your athletic career. And that's the most important thing. And that's where your identity becomes and lies in. I just think there's so much more that sports provide and athletics provides than just, what you have on paper.
Sure.
I remember doing my resume my junior year in one of my professional development classes. And I had, as student athletes, Division I student athletes, we don't have time for internships and things like that most of the time. We have to get pretty unique when it comes to that. So a lot of our resumes coming out of college are, how can we spin our athletic experiences into a professional world, which resonates a lot. And there's a lot of transferable skills. But I remember having a lot of my accolades down on my resume. And my dad said, give it 2-3 years and you're going to have, 2-3 bullet points of those left. And I was like, what do you mean? I've worked my entire life for this. Like, that's
Right.
supposed to be my entire resume. And he's like, no, like at one point you're going to have all these professional skills that you are going to put on your resume, and all of those athletic accolades, Big Ten championships, scholarships, individual things. Those are all going to go into 1-2 bullet points and call it a day. People really just care that you were a student athlete, and all the other skills that they know set you apart, not really how many medals you have and what scores you ended up in your career.
Awesome. And you went from competing for national championships to working in athletic development at Boston College and now serving at the Air Force Academy.
Mm-hmm.
How did your athletic achievements shape your understanding of what true success comes from using your platform to serve something greater than yourself, working with in academics as well as with athletes now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I wish I knew development was a bigger piece when I was a student athlete myself. We always joke, no one graduates and thinks they want to be a fundraiser. But it's such a big part to the student athlete experience as a whole. When I think back to some of the postseason gear that we got, or when I was at Utah, we got to charter a plane, or some of the extra meals that we had on the weekends when the dining hall wasn't open, or, some of that new equipment that we might have gotten. A lot of those things don't come just from, the athletics department. It comes from your supporters, your donors. We talk about endowed scholarships, at the Air Force Academy. Obviously, we don't have those because everyone's on a full ride scholarship. But when we were at Boston College, we were trying to help get endowed scholarships for a lot of these student athletes. With the NCAA, they changed the scholarship rule, right? And so now it's not based on just Title IX and how many scholarships each sport. Each sport is based on the roster, right? And so we had endowed scholarships at Michigan. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't realize that someone, gave philanthropically to a mission, which was women's sports, and endowed a scholarship for us to have a full ride scholarship to go to college at the University of Michigan. I had no idea about all of that, And so I wish I knew a little bit more going in as a student athlete, and I could be a little bit more thankful and understand and appreciate, those people. And I wish I could have had a greater relationship with some of those donors. Our biggest donor at gymnastics, he named the facility at the softball and gymnastics facility and helped build both of those. He has scholarship throughout multiple women's sports and the band, actually. Funny story about him. He actually went many, many years ago to go give money to the football team. And the football coach kind of slept him off and was like, who is this guy at practice? Like, no. So he went to the athletic director and said, all right, what programs need money? Because I'm not giving it to that program. Like, clearly they have enough that they don't care. And so he was like, well, we have 2 women's sports that, are really up and coming. How about that? And, he's transformed both of those programs. I would say both of those programs are probably the most winningest female programs at Michigan. And so I think, competing at the very top and understanding that it takes a village to get there. And it's not just, me and my team putting in the hard work and doing our job, but it's everyone else doing their job, having our donors and our supporters doing their job, having, our compliance office, making sure that we're all eligible. It's making sure, that our team that's setting up all of our equipment is there and doing everything on time. It's our coaches. It's, it takes a village. It takes everyone.
Totally.
And not just, it's easy for us as athletes just to think that it's all on our shoulders and it's just us out there and it's all about us, me, when it really does take a village. And I think not until stepping into this role more on the administrative side of college athletics and seeing that, I just really understood and had a greater appreciation for it.
That's awesome. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's amazing. Do you have that gentleman's name? Do you want to give him a shout out, or you can if you?
I'm totally blanking on that name right now. Let me think about it, but I will give him a shout out. He has a whole bio on Michigan's development website. He's an incredible, incredible man.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We'll get to that name. But right now I'm going to turn it over to Erin for segment 2, which is identity and service. Erin, take it away.
Abby, thanks so much for joining us. So I want to just start off my segment here with who is Abby? Beyond all the accolades that Thomas shared at the top of the show, just who's Abby?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. I'm a total goofball, like the most bubbliest, clumsiest goofball person. But I definitely believe in just like helping others, making everyone feel heard. I feel like those are all cliche sayings, but, I'm not who I am and I'm not at my best if everyone else isn't at their best, And so I'm definitely one of those people that likes to pour into others at all times. I've never met a stranger. I will never stop talking. And I absolutely love my family.
Oh, I love that. That's so awesome. Yeah, it's so funny. My daughter is just wrapping up her senior year at high school, and I could see the girls at senior night for you just talking about how your personality and what you bring to the team. Like I have this whole vision. I'm sure that happened. I just love those moments because girls are very different.
Yes. And what's so funny is I started off as a little girl who could not go on the school bus in first grade, had to eat with like our behavioralist because I couldn't make friends. I was so shy, crying at school every day. And my parents are always to this day like, we always worried about you. We didn't know if you were ever going to be able to do like anything. You were so shy. And now you're like the most talkative person and like to everyone. Like what happened? And I will say, plug it. Sports and gymnastics are for sure the reason why.
Yep. It's amazing what sports does. It clearly brought you out of your shell, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
I love it. So you and your husband both have just an incredible academic service to athletes, and I want you to tell our audience, what does legacy beyond athletic achievement mean to you, especially when you're helping develop not only the future athletes, but the next military leaders of our country?
Yeah, I think, I learned this lesson a little bit late, and I wish I would have learned it a little earlier in the sense that people aren't going to remember whether you score the highest event score to make us go to regionals, or you fell and you disqualified us, or you didn't score that goal in soccer, or, you had the fastest time in swimming or track. Those things aren't what people remember. I couldn't even tell you, like, half the meets that I competed at and what scores I got. But people remember how you made them feel. People remember the teammate that they would go to make them laugh. People remember the teammate that when they were down in the dumps, they would always say yes to go get ice cream. They remember the teammates that did their hair. They remember, all these different things that those are what people remember. People remember how you made them feel. And so I feel like when you talk about that legacy term, I know me and my husband were both very big on, teammates come first and how you make people feel come first. And that's the legacy we wanted to leave rather than, any of these accolades.
I love that. I think that's so important. And you're absolutely right. You don't remember those details. So now you work with donors, campus partners, and leadership to support fundraising priorities for cadet athletes who become leaders in the Air Force and Space Force. What separates athletes who compete for themselves from those who understand they're part of something greater? And what's the service piece that transforms athletics excellence into leadership of character?
Oh, these are great questions, guys. I'm making me think this morning. I think I've said this before. I think, those athletes, especially the ones at the academy, are so special. I've said it, they're signing up to do something beyond themselves. When we talk about what, these cadet athletes go through, they're waking up at 6 a.m. and going to breakfast at 7 all together. They march into breakfast, so when they wake up at 6 a.m. and they march to breakfast at 7, that means they're in uniform, ready for the school day. Their bed is made in military grade. They're all doing it together. They march into breakfast, they go to class, they have noon formations, they all line up, do the same thing and go to lunch. They all have a few classes after that. Every sport starts at 2:00, so everyone has practice at 2. And then from 2 to 6, they do, practice, treatment, rehab, you name it. And then they go study, finish their homework, and then go to bed and do it all over again. There's no break for them. I think the tenacity and perseverance that those athletes have, builds character in itself, I could have named a handful of times where I didn't make my bed in the morning, or I purposely scheduled classes to not be on Friday. And, they don't have that autonomy. And so when we talk about, just becoming leaders and being something bigger than themselves, they sign up for that at 18 years old and they live, breathe it for 4 years. And then they go off and do it for a minimum of another 5 years. And so I don't know if people realize that, but they're in military formation all 4 years while they're on campus. And then they have 5 years of service to give back, minimum. And so I think just their tenacity, their hard work is something that's so special. And like I said, when we're talking to these donors and these supporters, that's not saying that they're not giving up anything that is athletics. We had our gymnastics team go to the final, the NCAA bracket March Madness of gymnastics. We had a gymnast qualify the NCAA Championship, so she went the farthest ever. My husband was there. He won 2 conference championships. We were in the conference finals for women's basketball. We have the most commander-in-chiefs for football. So that's not to say that we're, sacrificing all of that not to, strive on the field or on the court or, on the mat. And so I think that's what's so special about the academy. And they're doing it the way it's supposed to be, right? As I mentioned, there's no NIL, there's no revenue share. There's no, one athlete being above something else. As you mentioned, doing it for something greater than themselves. That's what every professional, every organization, every company later in life, those are the skills they want. They don't want someone coming in thinking that, they deserve XYZ or it's a one-man shop. It's a team. It takes a village. And I think, you learn that at the academy from day one.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's almost kind of an anomaly right now within the landscape of college sports. And I think much needed. So shout out, go to the academies, kids.
Go to the academies. Let me tell you. Yeah. If you want to build true leaders, I'm saying, and that's not to say that, there's not schools and there's not programs out there that aren't the same, but it's definitely changing right now. And I think, you hear some football coaches that were talking about the transfer portal a lot. I remember reading something about the Texas football coach who said, if you're going in the portal just to search for how much money you want, you're not coming back to Texas. Your position's going to be filled. We're not, going out there seeing what money we can get and coming back here. And I know a lot of coaches are starting to do that and say no, we can't build a winning championship off, wishy-washy. We're only here for yourself and the attention and NIL money that we can get. I remember hearing the headline for Michigan winning the NCAA Championship in basketball, and they said the headline was first team to win with like 5 new transfer starters. I'm like, that's not really the headline I want to hear. I want to watch the kid that's been there since freshman year that is now a senior and has helped transform his team, And so I think those are the stories I like to hear.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And I think you're spot on. Like and the relationship you talked about earlier of building that relationship with your donors, and who's supporting you, that attitude of gratitude versus, what's in it for me and taking versus what can I give? Because these donors are giving for me to be here. So how am I giving back? So
exactly.
I think that's so powerful.
Yeah. And, when I was having conversations with donors at BC, a lot of it was, scholarship, but a lot of it was, NIL conversations, like subsidies, like can you give us money, help us raise money for revenue share, for NIL, for these other things, And at and at Air Force, like those aren't the conversations. The conversations are your dollars are going directly to support, the cadet athlete experience. They're going to help those locker room renovations. They're going to help with flights. Maybe the team can take a 2:00 flight instead of an 8:00 flight and not get there at 10 p.m. Extra nutrition, things like that are really going to help the student athlete versus, a lot of these colleges are finding their way of, we need development more than ever, but we need development, to keep players on our roster. And, that doesn't feel as good, that attitude of gratitude or like true philanthropic conversations.
Yeah. So my last question before I turn it back to Thomas is, what's one truth you wish athletes, the current athlete today, really understood?
Oh, there's so many. One truth, I think, your identity isn't in sport. And I think, the other piece to that is we always talk about, athletes make the best leaders, but it's not best athletes make the best leaders. It's athletes make the best leaders. And so I think we get caught up into, like I said, I can't be a leader unless have the most playing time. I have the best scores. I'm on top of the leaderboard. And that's not true. That's why we put kids into sports. As we mentioned, I was a shy little kid and now here I am. We put kids into sports because of so many other things. And so, on top of that, like sport isn't your identity. There's so much to it and there's so much to take from it. And there's so many life skills that are so transferable. And it's like such a small portion of your life. Like when you're done, whether at 18 or 23, there's so much more to life and what you can learn from everything that sport has taught you and all the leadership qualities and leadership skills that you have learned. But I think we get mixed up of, best athlete, best leader. And then that's not the case,
No, I love that. Okay, Thomas, I'm going to kick it back over to you.
Awesome. Abby, we're going to get into segment advice across all stages. If you could sit down with yourself as a young student athlete at Michigan, before you understood how athletic excellence could translate to service and developing others, what advice would you give the young Abby about purpose and leadership?
Oh, what would I give? Be authentic and be yourself. There's many different types of leadership styles. And while they're all to the same goal and they end up in the same spot, there's so many different ways and so many different avenues to get there. And so I think don't try to be something that you're not. Take the skills that are innately who you are. For me, it was being super vocal, being super loud, being super bubbly. That's not everyone's cup of tea, and there's definitely leaders out there that are the stealthy, silent, but deadly leaders that, people just gravitate towards. And so find what resonates with you, being your most authentic self, because that's how you're going to get the most out of it.
Sure. And what about current student athletes who are achieving at high levels but may not understand how to translate competitive excellence into service and character leadership? What do they need to know about building identity beyond individual achievement?
What do they need to know beyond individual achievement? I mean, I think the number one thing that I realized is that sport has so many transferable skills. And I know I've said that about 800 times, but when we talk about, teamwork, we talk about being able to perform under pressure. We talk about being able to talk to leadership, your coaches, your captains, you name it. When we talk about, hitting deadlines, like all these things, time management, you're being a student athlete, so you're doing school and athletics, then we talk about all these skills, but they're so transferable into the workplace and into leadership. And that's the reason why, so many employees want to hire athletes. And it's not because of, they were, an All-American, but it's because they have these skills that, they don't have to teach. They can teach you what their company is about and how to work their CRM system. They can't teach you, how to motivate yourself, or, are they going to be able to meet time? Are they going to be able to perform under pressure? Do they know how to multitask? All those things that athletes we take for granted because we've just been doing it for our whole lives.
Sure.
And so realizing that there are so many skills that we have that build such great leaders of character. And as long as you're being authentic to yourself, realizing that you have all those things and being confident in that.
That's awesome. You have a very unique position, having competed at Michigan and the University of Utah, and now you're dealing with cadets at an academy. And of course, you can't speak for all academies, but what would you say to parents and coaches working with young athletes? What do they need to understand about developing character alongside athletic achievement, especially if they're considering one of the service academies?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I think, my parents told me this story when I was, doing my master's, one of my master's thesis projects. And it was about, sport specialization and how much pressure, parents are putting on student athletes these days and young athletes. And they said that my club coach would sit all of the parents down and say, if you are giving me your money to get your child a scholarship, you are better off saving your money. He's like, I am not here to just get your child a scholarship. I'm here to build strong young women. And I thought that was so powerful.
Right.
We used to, after practice, we would sit down. He had a quote jar and we picked 2 or 3 quotes. And every practice we talk about, what those quote means and how we can instill those in our practice and in our daily lives. And I think, for me, it started from a young age. I had great parents that always were looking out for those type of things and me beyond just my sport, but also my club coaches were instilling in that too, and the fact that the end goal isn't just, yeah, sure, it's Division I athletics. It's everyone's end goal. But what else are we achieving along the way?
Right.
What are we achieving as building, young women, young men of character,
Sure.
Like we said, we talked about dealing with hard things, how to push through, how to make goals, how to achieve goals, how to set goals, all these different things that, athletics brings. Not to mention, it helps us with just your overall wellness and health and well-being when it comes mentally and physically. And so I think we take for granted all of these amazing things that sports brings to young athletes and to young adults. And we kind of get blindsided by that end goal, that gold under the rainbow of, D1 athletics or, professional athletics. And we
Sure.
forget to stop and think about, all the other things that we're building, that the building blocks to get there.
Totally. And on that one, I'm going to turn it over to Erin, segment 5, rapid fire round. Erin, take it away.
Awesome. So this is fun. I'm going to just start a sentence and you're going to finish it for me. Okay.
Okay.
Discipline equals.
Discipline equals hard work.
Leadership equals.
Good character.
Service equals.
I can't say hard work again. Service equals tenacity.
Legacy equals.
How you make people feel.
What is one thing you would never compromise on?
Who I am.
And if you could have put a message on a billboard for the next generation of athletes, what would it be?
You are more than sport, and there's so much more to sport.
I love it. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Thomas.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. Abby, we're going to get in the closing round here. And before we wrap up, we always love to turn the floor over to our guest. Is there something we didn't touch on today that you feel student athletes, parents, or coaches need to hear about character development, service, and building a life of purpose well beyond their personal achievements?
Yeah, I think, when we're talking about finding a place that you want your son or daughter to go after, high school athletics, I think a big thing that people are now forgetting is that it's not just about sports, and there's so many other things that you're picking a university for. And obviously right now it's a lot tied into money and how much money is my son or daughter going to get. But also I think we forget that a lot of those dollars are for very few sports, right? And that shouldn't be the number one thing that you're deciding by. And as we've mentioned, there's so many different things that build you into becoming a leader of character. And I think, finding that beyond, taking some real deep time to figure out what that means for your son or daughter and not just picking based on the sport or maybe even just the coach. I know you want a good coach, but what else are they going to provide for you? At Michigan, there was a lot of different things that we had. We had a lot of career centers. We had a lot of conversations about what you're going to do beyond sport. And I think that's what helped me a lot with my transition too, of becoming a leader in sport beyond being a student athlete. And so when I was going on to Utah and, I was 23 and making that decision myself, those are some big questions that I had for myself. And, the reason why I transferred was I knew I wanted to work in college athletics. And what better way to see another conference, another athletic department, see a marketing op department that truly supports women's sports with 15,000 fans at a women's gymnastics meet, making those decisions beyond just who you are as an athlete and really making those decisions based on who you want to be after those 4 years and how that's going to trajectory you into who you want to be.
Awesome. All right, you went from the rapid fire to the hot seat. Okay, according to Abby, of the 4 events, vault, uneven bars, balance beam, floor exercises, rank them best to worst according to Abby.
According to Abby, so absolute worst is the balance beam. I can absolutely tell you that. If we're talking about practicing every day, because I think there's a difference between competing and practicing.
Sure.
Which are the ones that you love to just do every single day. I loved bars. Bars was number 1. Floor was number 2. Vault was number 3. Beam was still the bottom.
I love that. That is awesome. Abby, thank you so much for your time. But before we close out, let the audience know where they can connect with you, whether that's your social media, a website, or your email.
Yeah, honestly, any of the above. Social media is my now new last name, which is Blessing. So it's Abby Blessing. My email is my first and last name, 22@gmail.com. So Abby Brenner 22@gmail. LinkedIn, it's still my maiden name. So Abby Brenner. I'm still in the transition of changing. So bear with me. But yeah, any of the above. And please, please, please do not hesitate to reach out. I mean, if there's any gymnastics families, I love talking gymnastics. There are so many skills beyond just, building character and leadership that I love to talk about that, I definitely struggled mentally through, learning how to compete and things like that. So if there's things even beyond just, becoming leaders and good character and professional development, I am, all ears. I love to pick up the phone and have a conversation. So anyone out there that's, wanting to connect, please don't hesitate.
That's awesome, Abby. Thank you so much for showing us what it looks like to translate athletic excellence into service and developing leaders and character. Big, big, big thanks. And team, if this conversation hit you, we need you to do 2 things. 1, share this episode with someone that needs to hear it. A student athlete who needs to understand character and service. A parent considering one of the service academies. A coach who wants to develop leaders alongside champions. And 2, learn more about the Air Force Academy's mission to develop leaders and character through the Air Force as well as Space Force. And if you're called to serve something greater than yourself, explore what makes Service Academy athletics special. And if you're an athlete or parent or a coach ready to raise the standard, check out me and Erin at blueprintbluechip.com. We help athletes build identity, discipline, and legacy that goes far beyond the sport. And if this episode resonated with you, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps us reach more athletes, parents, leaders who need to hear this message. And team, please take Abby up on her offer to reach out to her. She's an exceptional resource. If this is a standard podcast, and this movement only grows when we raise the standard together. Talent fades, but truth endures. Let's raise the bar, rebuild the culture, and become the standard. We'll see you next time. Abby, Erin, thank you guys so much. You guys have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you. You too. Thanks so much for having me.
That was awesome. Excellent. Abby, you were absolutely